Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
After dropping out of college due to financial struggles, I needed a job fast. The dispensary was hiring and I figured it'd be a chill gig. Don't get me wrong, most customers were cool, but there was this one woman who made our lives hell. We called her Karen behind her back. She'd waltz in all smiles, then flip a switch and become a nightmare. One day, she came in acting sweet as pie. Karen greeted everyone cheerfully, asking how we were all doing. We smiled and greeted her back. I grabbed her usual order, but that's when the show began. Karen suddenly claimed that I hadn't brought her what she ordered and demanded I get her correct order. I tried to explain that she had specifically requested this eighth, mentioning the exact strain and amount. But Karen insisted that she had asked for pineapple gummies and ordered me to get them immediately. I bit my tongue and fetched the gummies. As I handed them over, she started complaining about how lazy we employees were, saying we couldn't even get a simple order right. Then just like that, she was all smiles again. She paid and left, only to return 30 minutes later with some absurd complaint. Sometimes Karen would claim the package was opened when she got home. Other times she'd say the edibles had melted together. On occasion, she'd insist there was a hair in her jar. And my personal favorite was when she claimed the packaging smelled like chlorine. Every single time. It was exhausting, but we couldn't do anything about it. She never crossed the line enough to get banned, and my boss was too scared of bad reviews to confront her. This went on for months. My co-workers and I were at our wits' end. We'd vent to each other after shifts, dreaming up ways to get back at her, but we never thought we'd get the chance. Then, one day, fate smiled upon me. I was in the next town over, filling up my car at a gas station. And who do I see behind the counter? Karen herself. I walked in, a plan already forming in my mind. I asked for a pack of Marlboro 100s. She grabbed the pack, and that's when I started my little game. I told her that wasn't what I asked for, claiming I had requested Camels instead. She sighed and grabbed the Camels. Then I changed my mind again, saying I actually wanted Newports. I could see the frustration building in her eyes. She knew exactly what I was doing. Karen asked if there was a problem, trying to keep her cool. I innocently replied that I was just there to pay for my gas. The look she gave me could have melted steel, but she knew she couldn't snap. She forced a smile, took my money, and I left. But I wasn't done. I came right back, and 5 minutes later, I complained to Karen that I had only spent a certain amount on gas, but she had taken all of my money, and I demanded to know where my change was. Karen, clearly irritated, tried to explain that the gas cost the exact amount I had given her, so there was no change. I then accused the employees of being lazy and unable to do simple math, mimicking her usual complaints. I smiled sweetly, said goodbye, and walked out, just like she always did to us. She didn't learn her lesson right away. She still came to the dispensary a few times, pulling her usual stunts. But I had a plan. I recruited a co-worker, and we both started visiting that gas station separately, giving Karen a taste of her own medicine. After a few weeks of this, Karen stopped coming to the dispensary entirely. We heard through the grapevine that she tried to file a complaint against us at the gas station, but it didn't go anywhere. Karma had finally caught up with her. I don't work at the dispensary anymore, but every time I think about how we turned the tables on Karen, I can't help but smile. It's been years, but the satisfaction of giving her a dose of her own medicine still feels sweet. A few months after Karen stopped coming in, I ran into her at the grocery store. She looked different, humbled, almost. She caught my eye and quickly looked away, clearly remembering our encounters. As she hurried past me, I heard her mutter a quiet apology under her breath. I didn't say anything back, but I nodded slightly. Maybe, just maybe, our little lesson had sunk in after all. And if it made her think twice before treating other service workers like dirt, then it was all worth it. I worked as an accountant, lived in a suburb, and kept to myself mostly. But everything changed when that woman moved in next door. From day one, she was a nightmare. Loud parties, leaving trash everywhere and constantly complaining about everything. I tried to be polite at first, but she just got worse. One day she stormed over to my house, pounding on the door. She started yelling at me about my trees, demanding that I do something about the leaves falling into her yard. I tried to explain that the trees had been there for years and weren't causing any harm, but she wouldn't listen. She threatened to sue me if I didn't cut them down. I shut the door in her face. That was probably my first mistake. After that, she made it her mission to make my life hell. She'd call the city with fake complaints, blast music at all hours, and even tried to get my dog taken away by animal control. I was at my wit's end. I started documenting everything, installing security cameras, and keeping a log of all her antics. My partner thought I was paranoid, but I knew something bad was coming. Then, we had to go out of town for a family emergency. I was nervous about leaving, but I thought my security measures would be enough. We got back a week later to find my shed burned to the ground and Karen's house a smoldering ruin. I was in shock. The police were everywhere, and Karen was screaming at anyone who would listen. She was blaming us for the fire, claiming our shed had caught fire and burned down her house. She was demanding that we pay for everything. How could my shed have caught fire when we weren't even home? Something didn't add up. The police came to question us, and I showed them all my security footage. They seemed interested but didn't say much. Days went by and we were left in limbo, not knowing what was going on. Then one evening a detective showed up at our door. He told us they had made some interesting discoveries and asked if we could come down to the station. At the station they showed us footage from a neighbor's security camera. There, clear as day, was Karen sneaking into our yard with a can of gasoline and some matches. We watched in horror as she doused our shed and set it alight. The detective explained that the fire had spread faster than Karen anticipated due to the wind. By the time the fire department arrived, it had jumped to her house and several others. I was stunned. I knew she was nasty, but I never thought she'd go this far. The detective continued telling us they were building a case against Karen but needed our help. They wanted to set up a sting to get her to confess. I agreed without hesitation. They gave me a wire and sent me to talk to Karen, who was staying in a nearby motel. I knocked on her door, heart pounding. When Karen answered, she immediately asked what I wanted in a hostile tone. I pretended to be concerned about her well-being, saying the whole situation was awful. She lashed out, blaming me for everything and saying if I had just cut down the trees, none of this would have happened. I pressed her further, asking what she meant. She accused me of playing dumb and insisted that she knew my shed had started the fire. Taking a deep breath, I told her I knew what really happened and that I had seen the footage. Her face went pale. She demanded to know what footage I was talking about. I explained about the security camera across the street that had caught everything, including her starting the fire in my shed. She lunged at me, grabbing my shirt, and insisted that I couldn't prove anything and that it was just my word against hers. I calmly told her that the police had the footage and were probably on their way right then. As if on cue, police sirens wailed in the distance. Karen's eyes went wide with panic. She finally broke down and admitted to setting the fire. She tried to justify her actions, saying, I deserved it because of my perfect little life and how I always looked down on her. She claimed she just wanted to teach me a lesson. The police burst in at that moment, arresting Karen on the spot. In the end, Karen was charged with arson, attempted murder, and a host of other crimes. She lost everything: her house, her possessions, and her freedom. The neighbors whose homes were damaged sued her for everything she had left. I got to rebuild my shed, this time with fireproof materials. The whole neighborhood came together to help clean up the mess Karen had left behind. It wasn't the ending I expected, but at least now we could all sleep soundly, knowing the real fire starter was behind bars. I work as a software developer for a big tech company in London. It's a demanding job, and I often find myself working late into the evening. This particular Friday was especially grueling. We had a major project deadline looming, and I've been at the office since 7 a.m. debugging code and attending back-to-back meetings. By the time I finally left work, it was already past 5 p.m. All I wanted was to get home, kick off my shoes, and relax with a cold beer. I live in a quiet neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Our street is a private road where each resident owns their section of land. One unique feature of our street is that our driveways are located opposite our houses on the other side of the road. As I turned onto my street, exhausted and daydreaming about my upcoming weekend, I noticed something odd. There was a car parked in my driveway. At first, I thought I must be seeing things. Who would have the nerve to park in someone else's driveway? I slowed down and saw a woman and a teenage boy walking towards my neighbor's house. Irritation bubbled up inside me. I rolled down my window and called out to them, asking if the car in my driveway belonged to them. The woman turned around, looking slightly annoyed at being interrupted. She confirmed it was her car and asked if there was a problem. I explained that it was my private property and requested that she move her vehicle. Her response was far from apologetic. In fact, she sounded downright condescending as she tried to justify her actions by saying she was only going to be there for 2 minutes. My patience, already worn thin from my long day, snapped. I retorted, pointing out that regardless of her intended duration, it was still my property and my actual driveway, and I needed to park my car. I'll admit my tone wasn't the friendliest. But come on, who thinks it's okay to park on a stranger's driveway? The woman huffed and started walking back to her car. As she got in and started the engine, I heard her call my behavior pathetic, which made my blood boil. Her son, still standing by my neighbor's door, decided to chime in, suggesting I should just park and leave it be. These people had the audacity to park on my property and then act like I was the unreasonable one. I responded tersely, pointing out that I would park if his mother wasn't still blocking my path. By this point, I was so angry I was shaking. I gripped my steering wheel tightly, praying I wouldn't stall my car and look like a complete idiot. The woman finally backed out of my driveway, deliberately taking her time. As she drove past me, she gave me a look that could curdle milk. I ignored her and pulled into my spot, still fuming. Just as I thought the ordeal was over, I heard a knock on my car window. It was my neighbor, looking concerned. He asked if everything was okay, mentioning that he had witnessed the incident. I explained the situation, and to my surprise, my neighbor nodded knowingly. He revealed that the woman was his sister-in-law, whom he referred to as Karen, and apologized for her behavior, explaining that she always acted like she owned the place. I assured him it wasn't his fault, but suggested he might want to talk to her about respecting other people's property. My neighbor agreed enthusiastically, mentioning he had an idea to address the situation. He grinned mischievously and pulled out his phone. He quickly typed something and showed me the screen. It was a message to the neighborhood WhatsApp group, warning everyone about Karen's behavior and reminding them that parking on private property without permission could result in towing. My neighbor explained that this should teach Karen and assured me he would also have a stern word with her. As I finally made my way into my house, I heard my phone ping. It was a notification from the neighborhood group. Dozens of neighbors had already responded, thanking my neighbor for the warning and sharing their own stories about Karen's entitled behavior. I may have had a stressful encounter, but it brought our community closer together. And who knows, maybe Karen will think twice before parking on someone else's property again. Let me tell you about something wild that happened to me recently. I'm a college student majoring in computer science with a focus on cybersecurity. I've always been fascinated by how information flows in our digital age and how important it is to protect sensitive data. That's why I chose this field. I want to be on the front lines of keeping people's information safe. So there I was, rushing between classes on a Tuesday afternoon. My phone starts ringing and I see it's from the state unemployment office. Weird, I thought, since I hadn't filed for unemployment, and I answered anyway, figuring it must be important. When I picked up, the unemployment officer told me they were calling about my unemployment claim and needed some additional information to finish processing it. I was confused and explained that I hadn't filed for unemployment. The officer seemed surprised and said they'd double-check the name on the claim. It turned out the claim was for someone else with a similar name. I took down the person's name, thinking I might be able to help them out somehow. After classes, I had an idea. Our city has this big Facebook group where people share all sorts of local information. I thought, why not post there and see if anyone knows this person? So I made a quick post explaining the situation, and not even 5 minutes later, this woman, let's call her Karen, comments on my post. She said she could help because she worked at a big law firm and had access to tons of people's information. Then she proceeded to list personal details about the guy I was looking for. She just casually dropped someone's private information in a public Facebook comment, and then she had the nerve to brag about it. Karen went on to boast that she could access their system from home too, and that she'd been doing it for years without getting caught. She seemed to think this was pretty cool. People in the comments immediately called her out. One commenter expressed shock that she was sharing that info publicly. Another pointed out that it was a huge security breach and she could get in serious trouble for it. As someone studying cybersecurity, alarm bells were going off in my head. I knew I had to do something. So I took screenshots of everything, including my original post and her comments. Then I did some digging. Turns out Karen wasn't just working at any old place. She was an office manager at the biggest, most powerful law firm in our city. Now I know from my studies that lawyers have super strict rules about client confidentiality. The whole firm could lose their license if they mishandled client info. I put together all the evidence, the screenshots, info about the law firm, even the rules from the American Bar Association website. Then I sent it all through the law firm's contact form on their website. For good measure, I also emailed it directly to the head counsel and the firm's president. I thought that was that, but then my Facebook Messenger pinged. It was Karen. She just said, "Nice try," and sent me a screenshot of my contact form submission, then blocked me. I was stunned. How did she get that? Did she have access to the firm's incoming messages too? The next day, I got another message, this time from a legal assistant at the firm. They told me they'd received my complaint and were taking it very seriously. They asked if I could provide more details about what happened. I explained everything, emphasizing that Karen had bragged about this publicly. The assistant thanked me and said they'd be starting an internal investigation immediately. I didn't hear anything for a few days after that, but when I went to look up Karen's LinkedIn page again, out of curiosity, it was gone. Completely vanished. I'm pretty sure she got fired. I never did find out if that guy got his unemployment claim sorted. But I'd like to think that by exposing Karen's misuse of private information, I not only helped protect that guy's data, but potentially the data of countless other people too. It just goes to show you never know when your specialized knowledge might come in handy to stop someone from abusing their power. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.